They're literally
Yeah.
friends at Mickey Mouse Club. There's like videos of them like riding horses together.
They were the faces of a generation. From the late 90s into the early 2000s, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were marketed not only as the biggest pop stars in the world, but also as kindred spirits, two former child performers who rose from the same stage of the Mickey Mouse Club to dominate global charts. On magazine covers, they smiled side by side. On red carpets, cameras framed them as rivals turned friends. To the public, it felt like a fairy tale of sisterhood in pop music. But behind the glitter, shadows lingered. Interviews hinted at contradictions. Christina once described Britney as not real in a 2003 magazine profile, while Britney remained pointedly silent. Even their most iconic joint moment, the infamous MTV Video Music Awards kiss with Madonna in 2003, showed how the illusion fractured. Britney's kiss dominated headlines, while Christina's was cropped out of most broadcasts. Fans were left wondering, was this a genuine bond or a carefully scripted performance designed to sell records? The story of Britney and Christina is not just about friendship. It is about how Hollywood constructs, markets, and destroys the very idea of intimacy. So we must ask, was this friendship ever real, or just another act on the world's biggest stage? Before they were international icons, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera were simply two young girls singing and dancing on the Mickey Mouse Club in 1993. Sharing the same stage with Justin Timberlake and Ryan Gosling, they were cast as childhood peers destined for stardom. Producers highlighted their vocal power and charisma, often placing them in the same group numbers, planting the seeds of a story. Two talented girls equals growing up in harmony. When Britney released Baby One More Time in January 1999, the pop landscape changed overnight. The song shot to #1 on the Billboard Hot 100. The video, Britney in a schoolgirl outfit, became a cultural phenomenon, and suddenly she was America's pop princess. Christina followed just months later with Genie in a Bottle, which also hit #1 in June 1999 and earned her a Grammy for Best New Artist in 2000. To the press, it was a perfect symmetry. Two blonde teen idols, born the same year, both exploding onto the charts within months. But the music industry does not thrive on equality. It thrives on narrative. Teen magazines such as 17 and Teen People repeatedly placed Britney and Christina on their covers, using bold taglines like Best Friends or Fiercest Rivals. Their stylists leaned into contrast. Britney often portrayed as innocent, bubbly, dressed in pinks and pastels. Christina depicted as sultry, edgy, experimenting with leather and darker makeup. The implication was simple. They were two sides of the same coin, complementing and competing in equal measure. On red carpets from the 2000 Grammys to the 2001 MTV Video Music Awards, publicists ensured they crossed paths. Photographers snapped images of them hugging, whispering, or laughing together. Images later distributed to tabloids as proof of a golden sisterhood in pop. These photo ops were rarely spontaneous. PR teams would align arrival times, instruct stylists to coordinate color palettes, and even stage seating arrangements so the two would be seen together. The friendship narrative wasn't organic, it was choreographed. Talk shows reinforced the story. In early interviews, Britney praised Christina as so talented, while Christina said Britney was sweet. Producers often booked them for back-to-back appearances, maximizing the impression of closeness. MTV's Total Request. Live in a 1999 ran multiple segments where hosts asked fans to vote for their favorite, but always framed the two singers as part of the same family of teen pop. Rivalry and friendship blended until the line between truth and marketing became impossible to separate. Perhaps the most telling chapter of this manufactured image came with franchise opportunities. Pepsi famously signed Britney to a multi-million-dollar endorsement deal in 2001. Christina, not to be outdone, became a face of Coca-Cola. Commercials ran simultaneously, reinforcing the idea that these two women weren't just singers, they were cultural icons locked in a carefully staged, friendly competition. Fans were invited to choose sides, but the illusion remained that underneath, Britney and Christina were united as sisters of pop. By 2002, the narrative had hardened into certainty. Every article, every award show, every cover reinforced the same duality. Britney the princess, Christina the rebel, yet somehow still best friends. To audiences it was believable because it was repeated endlessly. Illusion, repeated often enough, hardens into truth. By the early 2000s, the narrative of Britney and Christina as pop sisters began to strain under the weight of reality. Behind the carefully managed smiles, subtle signs of fracture appeared. At first, they were easy to dismiss. Missed appearances together, a sharp word in an interview, but over time, the pattern grew undeniable. Money was the first wedge. Britney's tours in 2000 and 2001 shattered records, selling out arenas worldwide and grossing over $40 million in a single year. Christina's tours, though successful, operated on a smaller scale. Industry insiders whispered about the disparity in paychecks. Britney was commanding multi-million-dollar endorsement deals with Pepsi, while Christina's Coca-Cola contract was significantly smaller. The media began to highlight the financial gap, framing Britney as the more bankable star. The so-called sisterhood looked less like equality and more like hierarchy. Then came the issue of credit and control. Britney was seen as a polished performer whose songs were carefully selected by producers like Max Martin. Christina, meanwhile, pushed for more creative input, clashing with her label over image and sound. By 2002, she launched the stripped era, reinventing herself with the provocative single Dirty. The contrast between Britney's polished innocence and Christina's raw defiance grew starker by the day. Their working styles diverged. Britney thrived on choreography and spectacle, while Christina leaned into vocal improvisation and artistic experimentation. Appearances began to tell their own story. At the 2002 MTV Video Music Awards, Britney was seated front row, directly in camera view. Christina, despite being nominated, was placed several rows back. Paparazzi lenses captured the physical distance. In group photos, they rarely stood side by side. Fans on online forums started documenting what they called a pattern of absence, an emerging visual map of how often Britney and Christina were deliberately separated at public events. The cracks widened in 2003 when Christina gave a candid interview to Blender magazine. Asked about Britney, she replied bluntly, "She's not real. I can't tell if there's a person there." The quote, splashed across headlines, cut deep into the public illusion of friendship. Britney did not respond directly, but her silence spoke volumes. Where once they exchanged compliments, now one side attacked, while the other withheld acknowledgement. Social media, still in its infancy, added another layer. In the mid-2000s, platforms like MySpace and early fan sites dissected every comment. Britney, struggling with intense media scrutiny, never mentioned Christina. Christina, meanwhile, shifted focus entirely to her own artistry, rarely acknowledging her supposed pop sister. The mutual silence became deafening. By 2007, as Britney faced her infamous breakdown, shaving her head, losing custody battles, and entering conservatorship, Christina was on a very different trajectory. She had just released Back to Basics, 2006, embraced motherhood, and presented herself as stable and mature. The contrast was brutal. Tabloids published side-by-side spreads. Britney's chaotic paparazzi photos next to Christina's polished maternity shoots. Fans noticed that Christina offered no public support. The sisterhood narrative collapsed under the weight of real life. The industry machine that once celebrated their shared roots now thrived on their distance. Gossip blogs framed Christina as cold, Britney as fragile. Headlines weaponized their differences. Britney melts down, Christina soars. People magazine, 2007. Where once PR agents staged photo ops of unity, now the absence itself became a story. By the end of the decade, the signs were impossible to ignore. Britney and Christina no longer appeared together, no longer praised each other in interviews, and no longer fed the illusion of friendship. The carefully curated narrative had unraveled. Cracks were no longer rumors. They had become the story. If the early 2000s showed cracks in the illusion, then 2003 was the year the mask finally slipped. It happened on one of the most watched stages in pop history, the MTV Video Music Awards. The performance was supposed to celebrate pop unity. Madonna, the queen of reinvention, shared the stage with her two heirs, Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera. Dressed in bridal gowns, both women leaned in to kiss Madonna. On paper, it was meant to be shocking, boundary-pushing, and equal. But in practice, it became a lesson in how media decides who matters. The cameras lingered on Britney's kiss with Madonna, replaying it in slow motion, splashing it across front pages the next morning. Christina's identical kiss? MTV cut away, showing Justin Timberlake's reaction instead. The New York Times headline the next day read, "Britney and Madonna's kiss stuns MTV." Christina was nearly erased from the cultural record of the event. That moment did more than expose media bias. It deepened a rift. Christina reportedly felt sidelined, forced once again into Britney's shadow. In interviews that followed, she spoke with a sharper edge. In a 2003 profile for Cosmopolitan, she remarked, "I'm not going to kiss a girl just for shock value. That's not me." To many, it sounded like a dig at Britney, who had embraced the spectacle. The dynamic only grew uglier in the years ahead. By 2007, Britney was spiraling under the glare of paparazzi, shaving her head in February, later attacking a photographer's car with an umbrella. The world watched her collapse in real time. Christina, meanwhile, was promoting back to basics and expecting her first child. When asked in a 2008 Cosmopolitan interview about Britney's troubles, her response was cool. "I've known her for a long time, but everyone has to find their own path." The words, though measured, felt distant, almost dismissive. Fans noticed the lack of solidarity. Social media erupted, with hashtags like Team Britney and Team Xtina dividing online communities. Where once they had been packaged as sisters, now the narrative was of rivals on opposite trajectories, one struggling for survival, the other ascending into stability. Tabloids amplified the drama. People magazine ran the headline, "Britney melts down, Christina moves on." Perez Hilton, then one of the most influential gossip bloggers, mocked Britney while praising Christina's control. The media no longer sold the illusion of friendship. It monetized the feud. And yet, the most damning silence came in moments of Britney's greatest vulnerability. During the height of the conservatorship in 2008, Christina made no public statements in her defense. Years later, in 2021, when the Free Britney movement exploded following the release of Framing Britney Spears, fans resurfaced Christina's old comments and accused her of hypocrisy. By then, Christina attempted to offer support on Twitter, writing, "It's unacceptable that any woman should not be in control of her own destiny." But for many it was too little, too late. The mask had not just slipped, it had shattered. What was once sold as a golden friendship of pop princesses had unraveled into silence, side remarks, and public indifference. What the industry crafted as sisterhood now stood exposed as rivalry, resentment, and perhaps most powerfully, absence. The scandal was never a single fight or a single betrayal. It was the accumulation of moments when performance ended and reality intruded. From the MTV kiss that erased Christina, to the interviews that cut Britney down, to the years of silence, When one woman suffered publicly while the other thrived privately, the story was no longer about friendship at all. The mask shattered in public. Once the illusion collapsed, the consequences rippled far beyond the two women themselves. Britney and Christina were no longer framed as pop sisters, but as cautionary opposites, two paths diverging under the unforgiving glare of fame. For Britney, the fallout was brutal and deeply personal. Her 2007 breakdown, followed by a court-ordered conservatorship in 2008, turned her into both a global headline and a tragic figure. Every stumble, every court hearing, every paparazzi shot became public property. Yet paradoxically, this vulnerability reshaped her legacy. Fans rallied under the banner of "Nuck Free Britney," transforming her from tabloid fodder into a symbol of resilience against industry exploitation. Her 2013-2017 Las Vegas residency, Britney Piece of Me, grossed over $137 million, proving that despite the chaos, the public still craved her presence. Christina, on the other hand, experienced a very different trajectory. As Britney struggled, Christina leaned into reinvention. Her 2006 album Back to Basics won praise for its retro influences, and in 2011 she became one of the original coaches on NBC's The Voice. The show debuted to over 11 million viewers, cementing Christina as a respected figure in a new format. Where Britney was cast as fragile, Christina was positioned as authoritative, a mentor, but the contrast carried a price. While Christina maintained artistic credibility, the lack of visible empathy toward Britney damaged her public perception. Think pieces questioned her silence. In 2011, Rolling Stone ran an article titled, "Why Did Christina Stay Quiet?" Fans, too, felt the absence. On forums and later Twitter, debates raged. Was Christina protecting her own career, or was she simply indifferent? The projects themselves reflected the divide. Britney's absence from collaborative events became glaring. In 2018, the Radio Disney Music Awards honored Britney with the first-ever Icon Award. Christina, who had recently released her album Liberation, was not present. Despite their shared history, journalists noticed, writing headlines like, "Where was Christina?" The silence once again became louder than words. Meanwhile, Hollywood itself moved on. Teen magazines no longer ran dual covers. Instead, media chose to compare them indirectly: Britney's struggles versus Christina's reinventions. One narrative sold tragedy, the other professionalism. And yet the irony was clear. Both women remained trapped by the same machine that had first marketed their friendship. One was punished for breaking down, the other penalized for holding back. The public response was divided. Some fans admired Christina for focusing on her artistry, refusing to indulge in what she once called fake industry friendships. Others accused her of cruelty, of abandoning a peer in crisis. Britney's supporters amplified the narrative that Christina was complicit in the silence, shaping her into an unwilling antagonist in the Free Britney saga. By the 2010s, their paths almost never crossed. Britney rarely toured outside of her Vegas residency, while Christina pivoted to TV and selective albums. They did not appear at each other's milestones. They did not issue public reconciliations. And so, the absence itself became the defining character in their story. The consequences, then, were not only personal, but cultural. Two artists once packaged as inseparable were now remembered as permanently divided. For Britney, the narrative of survival overshadowed the friendship. For Christina, the narrative of silence haunted her reputation. The illusion had dissolved. What remained was the emptiness where a friendship was supposed to be. The absence became a character in itself. Decades later, the story of Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera remains one of the most telling examples of how pop culture manufactures intimacy, and how easily that illusion can fracture. Their friendship was never just about two young women who happened to share a stage on the Mickey Mouse Club. It was about an industry that saw narrative as currency and sisterhood as a product to be packaged, sold, and consumed. In the late 1990s, magazines and TV shows needed icons. A rivalry disguised as friendship gave them endless headlines. Britney versus Christina, best friends or rivals? In reality, the industry had little interest in whether the women were genuinely close. What mattered was that fans believed it, at least long enough to buy albums, posters, and tickets. It was the classic Hollywood equation: create a myth, repeat it until it hardens into truth, and profit from the performance. But the cracks in that performance left behind a legacy of skepticism. Today, audiences are more media literate. They can recognize the stitches in a fabricated storyline. When Framing Britney Spears premiered in 2021, the documentary not only exposed the abuses of her conservatorship, but also revisited the silence of those around her, including Christina. Fans scrutinized old interviews, viral clips, and missing moments. What once passed as coincidence now read as strategy. The audience no longer swallowed the illusion whole. They dissected it, frame by frame. At the same time, the dual legacy of Britney and Christina complicates the narrative. Britney is remembered as both a victim of an exploitative system and a resilient survivor who reclaimed her freedom in 2021. Christina is remembered as the powerhouse voice who insisted on authenticity, rejecting manufactured friendships and focusing on artistic independence. Both identities are real, and yet both are shaped by the same machinery that pitted them against each other. This duality has echoed into newer generations of pop stars. Consider the comparisons between Lady Gaga and Katy Perry in the early 2010s, or Billie Eilish and Olivia Rodrigo more recently. The media still thrives on pairing young women as friends or rivals, often blurring the line between the two. The Britney-Christina saga became a blueprint, a cautionary tale of how the industry profits from both unity and division. The cultural lesson is sobering. Fans can love the art and the artists, but they must also see the hands pulling the strings. The friendship of Britney and Christina was never fully theirs to control. It was an invention of producers, publicists, and editors, wielded as a marketing weapon. And when reality intruded, through sharp words, awkward silences, or a public breakdown, the mask crumbled. Yet the irony of legacy is this: the myth endures. For every critical documentary or fan forum that dissects their rivalry, there are still nostalgic playlists and magazine retrospectives framing them as the pop princesses who ruled together. The illusion sells, even when the truth has long been exposed. So the legacy of their friendship is not just about what was real or fake. It is about how audiences learned to question what they were shown. It is about how celebrity culture evolved from blind consumption to active skepticism. And it is about how two women, forever linked by an illusion, became symbols of both the power and the cost of manufactured intimacy. The question that lingers is not just about Britney and Christina. It is broader, more unsettling. In the culture of fame, can friendship ever survive authenticity? Or is it always at risk of becoming a product on the shelf? So what do we make of Britney Spears and Christina Aguilera? To some, they were childhood peers who simply took different paths. To others, they were never truly friends at all, just two performers trapped in a narrative written for them by an industry hungry for drama. The truth may lie somewhere in between, but one fact is clear. The sisterhood the world celebrated was more stagecraft than sincerity. Now the question is yours. Do you believe this friendship was ever real? Or was it always a performance choreographed by Hollywood's relentless machine? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and let's keep the debate respectful and insightful. If you found this story eye-opening, make sure to like this video, subscribe to our channel, and turn on the notification bell. There are countless, untold Hollywood stories still waiting to be uncovered. Because behind the fame, even friendship can be an illusion.